Hello, welcome back to this little recording to give some more explanations about the second round of the preparation procedure for the big systematic review that we're doing about open digital health apps. We thought we'd make a little walkthrough because some people prefer video over reading instructions, and also then we can address some of the things that people mailed us about. So you will all have received this email a while ago, which basically explains roughly what the tasks consist of. One of the things that might be useful to do when you start is to look at the codes themselves, or the entities themselves, because the entities, the things we'll extract, are kind of hierarchically organized. We kind of try to cluster them together because that makes it a bit easier to rate them as well. So if you click that link, you see it's called an inductive code tree because we use qualitative software for this. But basically, you see the entities that you selected. What we did is that we tried to cluster everything together. So if interoperability was mentioned by a few people, then we retained one node called interoperability. So this might be useful to keep on your second or third or fourth screen to refer to as you are working with the spreadsheet. Then the spreadsheet itself is an attachment in the email you got. So if you open it, then you will see this. It has three worksheets, which we'll go through now. And the first worksheet is also the first task, where you see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 criteria on which we're going to rate all those entities. Of course, you don't know stuff about all entities because purposefully, we have a multidisciplinary group of experts. So there will be some entities that you will know a lot about, and there will be some or maybe a lot of entities that you will know almost nothing about. That's completely okay, of course. You can just rate them based on what you think, which criteria you think, or how it scores on the criteria. And then you indicate your confidence. So if you're not very confident, you can just indicate low confidence, and then we'll use that to weigh the ratings. So the first one here, for example, is the instantiation of a tool. You see here the original texts people said. If you double click it, it expands. Oh, if you double click it, it goes to the bottom. If you click here, you can make it larger so that you can read the whole text, or you can read the whole text at the top. So this entity was kind of based on user type, relevance to determine use cases, professional general population, and the question, what is open, and the data code design features content. So these were is this actually, does instantiation have, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so then wait a second. Olga, you were going to do the first one, right?
Yes, and I also think that maybe to explain a bit more about how it relates back to the coding tree, because now it's kind of a bit more hierarchical when we apply the coding. And I also think, JJ, this is kind of the initial tree, and you have to scroll down further in the markdown to get to after we applied all of our organization of the different entities. And you can see here in this document as well, kind of how we got to the different entities. Is it not at the bottom?
Maybe, going completely to the bottom is probably easier. Okay, these are the criteria. And then if we go further up, here, this is still the criteria, but then halfway through. And then then this. So it's about halfway through, apparently. Aha. So this is the final one.
Exactly. This is the final one. And I think because we created some higher order ones, and I think incidentally, the first one to rate is this instantiation one, which actually has sub ones. So it's kind of a hard one to start off with because it's kind of like it includes all of those other entities. So maybe we can show you like a one that's a bit more deep in the tree.
Yeah, like for example, human involvement.
Exactly.
For now, I will make the criteria, the explanation of the criteria shorter so that we have a bit more room, because this second screen is very low resolution. Okay. So these were the actual comments that you as experts provided. And human involvement is the kind of cluster we created. Of course, in the next step, once we selected the entities, there will also be work to work this out as an actual entity with instructions for how to extract it. And in those subgroups that we'll create, that subgroup might also decide that this should actually be split up into 2 or 3 or 4 entities, or that it is better to merge it with another one. So this is not final. This is just to get to the starting point to then do the real comprehensive work, because it's very hard to think about those entities. So you don't want to do that for 500 if you're only going to use 60 in the end. Okay, back to you, Olga.
Right.
And then maybe...
So then when we go about rating these different entities, we then suggest that you move through the different criteria. So we had 8 different criteria. And then for each of those, we ask you to rate them on a 100-point scale. So 0 means not very, not very important, for example, or 100 means extremely important. So for this one, when we think about human involvement in the back end of the device, so you do have to kind of look at the path as well. So here we kind of have instantiation of the tool. We have a back end one and a front end one. So this one refers to human involvement in the back end, kind of like a human in the loop to maybe create more tailored feedback, for example. So then I'm going to start off thinking about data accessibility. So this is if information about human involvement in the back end is currently going to be available and easily accessible in the types of reports where we'll extract the data from. And I'm going to say in my case, the kind of the stuff I read, I would say that this is probably not always very detailed in the papers that are out there. So I would maybe say like 60 for this one. Then we have effectiveness, informativeness. So the degree to which information about the entity will help people understand the tool's effectiveness. I think as well here, kind of human involvement in, again, related to sort of the degree of tailoring is likely going to have an impact on both user engagement and then effectiveness. So kind of my mental model of the world, I'm going to say that this is actually very useful for understanding effectiveness. So I'm going to give this a 90 score. Then we have expected extraction clarity. So the degree to which the entity refers to something that can be unequivocally defined and categorized to aid data extraction and not make it confusing. For this one, I mean, I think there's, I am not aware of any kind of taxonomy at the moment that would describe the different degrees of involvement. So I would say clarity is probably going to be quite low for this one and people can debate about it. So I will give this maybe a rating of 20. Then we have filter relevance. So in the final public-facing database, whether or the extent to which the information provided by extracting information about this entity or as a useful way for other people to basically filter out the tools that they are interested in. I think, yeah, it will have quite high relevance. So I'm going to give this a 95. again, goes back to my mental model about what people are interested in. It might not be the same for everyone and different fields or people working in different sectors and settings, but that's just my opinion. Then we get to implementation informativeness. So the degree to which information about this entity is informative when determining how the tool was implemented, and when determining whether and how to implement the tool in new settings. Yeah, so I think, for sort of thinking about how to adapt the tool in a new setting, I suppose, given that humans are involved and maybe there is a script for how they are involved and how information is converted into feedback, personalized feedback, I think information here is really important for implementing it in a different setting. I think maybe even more so than the filter relevance. I'm going to say 97. Okay, then we have instantiation informativeness. So the degree to which information about the entity helps people to understand and reproduce the technical requirements of the tool. Again, yeah, I think kind of the way in which this is implemented and information about that will be crucial for whether or not people can do this in a different setting and kind of adapt the tool for something else. So I'm going to say 97 here again. Then we have stability, the degree to which information about the entity is likely to remain stable over time. So here I would probably think that it sort of relates a bit to my mental model of like the extraction clarity, actually. So like, given that there aren't really any taxonomies and this might evolve over time, like how humans are involved, I think this is likely to change over time. So I suppose 100 means that there is a lot of stability. So I'm going to give it, I think, yeah, maybe a like 20 rating again. Yeah. Okay, uniqueness. This is the final entity. So the degree to which the entity provides unique information over and above other entities. And here, I think this one is pretty unique, actually. So I mean, also to say as well that given that it might be a bit cognitively demanding to have all of the different entities in your mind at the same time, I think it would also be perfectly fine to come back and maybe change this after you've had a look at some of the other entities. But for now, I'm going to say I think this is quite unique, actually. So I will say, yeah, 95 for this one, and then I might come back and change it. Okay, and then my confidence. Yeah, I think personally, I would say quite confident. So I'm going to give it an 85 rating.
Excellent. Well done. Those were all the correct answers. Yeah, and it's important to realize that, of course, I mean, you know, this difference is, you know, excellent, but in the end, it won't matter that much because we'll average over all people. So it's important that this one is 20 and these ones are high up. And that's, you know, if you're not confident about that, then maybe you should bring them closer together. But you don't have to worry too much about, you know, whether you rate something 15 or 20 or something. Because in the end, it will average with lots of other people. So the fact that it's all the way at the bottom matters. But exactly where, you can do that quite quickly. You don't have to, be stressed about that. Okay, so then I'll do the second one, interoperability. So these were this is basically what it is. This is what people suggested. So one person suggested this, but it was unique, and it seemed relevant. Okay, so data accessibility. How accessible is information about interoperability? I'm kind of skeptical that there will be super clear. Again, because there are often not taxonomies for many things, and there are often not standards for interoperability. So I think for very few apps, people will say, this is how we are interoperable. This is how we can interoperate with other platforms or applications. So I would say, yeah, maybe even 0, because I think this might be the least accessible thing, or one of the least accessible things. So I'll put it at 0 for now. And as Olga said, I can always change it back later. I think generally, I haven't actually done this myself yet, for real. So I'm going to save this spreadsheet and then just use this beginning. When I do it for real, I'll probably go over the list twice anyway, because exactly in the beginning, you have less of a frame of reference, of course. Okay, effectiveness, informativeness. I think interoperability tells you, well, I know for sure that it tells you nothing about whether something is effective. So that can go to 0. I mean, you could argue that if interoperability is well thought through, then probably other things are going to be well thought through as well. But, well, we don't even know that yet. So I would put that at 0 as well. I think it will also be quite, well, it might actually be kind of simple to extract, because, of course, we could do it categorically, for example, and then given that we will probably not get a lot of information, maybe like 3 categories could suffice, like not reported, some information about interoperability, and a lot of information about interoperability. And then we can always go back if it turns out that there are like 20 or 30 tools with a lot of information about interoperability. So this might be quite doable. So I'll give it 25. Filter relevance. I think it would be super important for people to know, because if you are looking for a tool, assuming that there will be some tools that are interoperable, usually you'll want to know how you can plug it into your existing infrastructure. So I think this will be, although for end users, it will depend on okay, so I'll give it 75. Implementation informativeness, also very relevant. Again, because you will usually want to interact with panels, with other things you have. So 90. Instantiation informativeness, not so much, because to actually implement, like technically, it doesn't matter whether it's interoperable or not. So I would say, yeah, on the other hand, if it uses like an API, okay, so let's give it 40. Then stability. I think this will change for a given tool over time, because I assume that tools, especially as they mature, will become more interoperable. On the other hand, I think there are a lot of tools out there that are not actually maintained anymore. So for those, it will be quite stable. So I'll just put it in the middle. And this is definitely unique. This doesn't really relate to anything else. I mean, you could argue that it relates to whether like ontologies or taxonomies are used for other things, but that's a far cry from interoperability. So I would say 100. And in terms of confidence, well, my confidence generally is quite high, but I'm not like a programmer, so I would say 75 maybe. Okay, so that would be. I love
the caveat that your confidence in general is quite high.
Yes, yeah, maybe we should let people rate that as well, and then we can adjust for that. Okay, so. That's how it goes. Of course, if you don't do the think aloud one, it goes much faster. And if you've done a few, it also goes faster. I mean, I've done MCDAs like this, like that's the process we're using, like the decision-making tool that this is, before, and it takes a while to get the hang of it, but then you can move through it much faster. Okay, so once you did this, you go to round 2, and then you weigh the criteria, because not all criteria are as relevant, and different people from different disciplines will probably find different criteria more or less relevant. So it's also important for us to get an idea of how important we think the criteria are, because then we can actually compute final scores for the entities and rank them, and then select the ones we want to select. So there were some examples here, which basically weighs them all equally. The total weight has to sum to 100. So how shall we do this? Well, we don't have to do it completely, of course, but well, let's say, Olga, shall we put data accessibility at 25?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you and I may have different opinions for this. I was also going to say that the process for this, I suppose, is very similar to task 1. So, you just give it a weight. It needs to sum up to 100, and then you rate your confidence in a similar way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I would probably put uniqueness quite high. So let's say I would want it to count for like a third of the scores of the entity. Then I would say 33. And then, of course, we'll multiply this with the scores, and then you get one final score for every entity, and then we can rank the entities, and then we can decide how many to select. Okay, so my confidence about data accessibility, whether I can judge data accessibility, would be like, I don't know, 30. Well, no, I'm 30. And like for instantiation informativeness, for example, because that's really quite techy, it would be lower. So maybe like 40, which might be the lowest confidence I score. So basically this way we know after this of everybody where their strengths and weaknesses are, kind of in terms of their confidence, both for how well they can score entities on a given criterion, but also how well they can score and a given entity on other criteria. So that allows us to also do like sensitivity analyses to make sure that what we end up with, the list, the ranking of entities, whether it's kind of robust. Okay, so then finally, the only thing you have to do is indicate how many entities you think we should extract. So we have like over 100 now. And of course, knowing more, since, basically extracting stuff from an article or about a tool is a lot of work, and you kind of dive into the tool or the article. And once you are at that point and you dove into it, at that point, even though extracting stuff is always quite a lot of work, of course, it is the least work. Once you dive out of it again, and like a few years later or months later, you decide you want other stuff, then it's really expensive in terms of time to dive into all the articles again. So on the one hand, there's something to be said for extracting everything. On the other hand, if we extract a lot of things, then every tool article will take 5 days to extract, and then will never get done. So there's a kind of balance there. And of course, if you haven't done systematic reviews yourself before, it might be hard to estimate this, but that's fine. Just to give a ballpark figure, and then we will get some average, we will get a distribution, and we can discuss what we actually do at a virtual meeting. So I would say like 50, because it's nice and it's about half of what everybody suggested. And that will be, and then we'll in the end decide what we do. I think that kind of covers it. Or is there more?
No, I think this covers it, right?
Excellent.
So then when you have finished your ratings, you just make sure to save your spreadsheet, maybe with your name as well in the title, and then email it over to us.
Yes. And of course, you don't have to do it in one go. You can just do a few rows like before breakfast or whatever works for you. Well, and then when it's done, mail it. Okay, perfect. Then I'll stop the streaming now. And if you think of anything else, Olga, we can just put it in the email. Well, thank you for your attention. This became slightly longer than we anticipated, but it has also hopefully been very educational and fun. See you later.